Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another Peace Islands New York event. We have the pleasure today of hosting Eboo Patel. He's running a few minutes late, so we wanted to introduce him to you. We have as the moderator today, speaking with Eboo, Rabbi Joshua Stanton. He's a good friend here in New York at the
East End Temple.
He's at the East End Temple. Sorry about that echo there. He's at the East End Temple here in Lower Manhattan. Welcome, Rabbi Josh.
It's so wonderful to be here with you. Thank you for being such a friend to my community, such an ally to the Jewish community, and for bringing us into conversation in a moment when we all really need it. And if I may, I want to talk about why Dr. Eboo Patel is such a significant person in my life, because it's not every day that a rabbi calls a prominent Muslim leader his mentor, but that is exactly what Dr. Patel is to me. And over 15 years ago, when I was a senior in college, I had a fellowship with what was then the Interfaith Youth Corps and now Interfaith America. And I got to read Dr. Patel's first book, Acts of Faith, and got to interact with him a lot and ask him big questions and hear about his story of organizing and building the country's largest interfaith organization. And since then, he has mentored me through rabbinical school, through the start of my work as a pulpit rabbi, through a lot of my experience in the nonprofit sector. And I have the great pleasure of serving on the board of directors of Interfaith America, which is a great honor and a continued source of learning. And what I love about his latest book, We Need to Build, is that in the middle of a time when a lot of us speak with slogans and without as much knowledge as we pretend to have on any number of topics, Dr. Patel is teaching us to build and to create in positive ways that can not only counter some of the polarization we're hearing, but actually help us build a better society. Dr. Patel, right on cue, how are you?
Ryan, it's nice to see you. Happy New Year to everyone. We've had a week of gray weather in Chicago, but you guys are like shunned. You're like the sun. You're like the sun. So I'll take that.
Well, I'll give the sun attribute to Rabbi Josh. I'll take maybe a distant Saturn moon or something.
Galaxy. We're all in the galaxy.
Welcome. Thank you, Eboo, for joining us. I know you have a busy schedule, and I just wanted to say a few words. I've had the pleasure of listening and spending time with Eboo during my period in Washington, D.C. Of course, there's detailed information in the YouTube description, and those that receive the email would know of Eboo's distinguished background, working with White House and numerous agencies and nonprofits. Of course, he started, as Rabbi Josh mentioned, with the Interfaith Youth Corps, and that's developed to something bigger and better now, Interfaith America. We'll be discussing his new book today. Rabbi Josh and Eboo, welcome again. Thank you for giving up of your time. For those that will be watching this later, of course, this is streaming live on YouTube. We will be taking questions via the chat, so please ask your questions there. Both in the description and in the chat, we've left a link to Eboo's book, the Amazon link there. So for those that haven't purchased it, by all means, please take time later. So again, welcome to you both. Thank you, and I leave it in Eboo's and Rabbi Joshua's hands. We'll come back for questions later.
Excellent. I'm following your lead, good Rabbi. So lead away.
Wonderful. So I spoke a little bit about why your book is so critically important at this time of polarization, when people are inclined to tear down and inclined to critique, not necessarily to create something better to replace that which they're critiquing. But I wanted to have you start, if it's okay, talking about your own stories, both of tearing down and now primarily of building, and how that shift occurred.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. So I'll actually tell a story of this happening kind of all at once, and in some ways an origin story of Interfaith America. So this is summer of 1998. It's at Stanford University. It's at the United Religions Initiative Global Summit there. I've just started to get involved in interfaith work. I kind of recognized for about a year the powerful connection between religion and social action, realized that it exists across different religious traditions. I wanted to be in a space where people of different faiths were talking about bridge building across diversity, but also about social action for their own faith. And so I'm at this summit. I'm 22, 23 years old. And, like a lot of conferences, they're boring for 22-year-olds. And back then I wasn't shy about telling people that. And so like literally from the floor of this conference with 500, 600, 700 very eminent people, religious leaders from around the world, I stand up during the Q&A session of after a panel discussion, and I like throw my fist in the air, and I'm like, you people are boring. Where's the social action? Where's the young people? Where's the edginess? And my inspiration from faith at that point had come from, I come from people like Dorothy Day and Malcolm X, and my reading of them, which was they were principally critics. They were principally people who were prophetic voices who protested against the system. I was less, I paid less attention to all of the powerful things that people like Dorothy Day had built. I was kind of in this critic energy. And so I did this. I thought that this is what you did if you were involved in social action work. You told other people what they were doing wrong. And after that, after I did this, it's always interesting. There's kind of a smattering of applause as if like, this is what young activists do. They tell older people what they're doing wrong, right? So there's kind of an affirmation of that. And I actually think, as I think about it, I think that that's kind of weird. I don't think we should be telling young people, you're at your best when you're telling other people what they're doing wrong, right? But that's a little bit of, I think, the patronizing approach that some older people take to younger people. But there was one person who didn't take that approach, and there's a woman named Yolande Trevino, and she comes to me after I say this, and she's like, it's interesting what you just said. This idea of interfaith work shouldn't just be senior religious leaders talking. It should be young people acting. There should be a social action component. It should have a vibrancy and an energy. You should build that. You should build that. And I think I was just at a point in my journey where that was like that was a moment for me, And I think part of what I felt was, boy, you're kind of taking me seriously. You're taking this idea seriously, and you're taking me seriously. And instead of just believing that all that I could do was tell other people what they were doing wrong, you're telling me if you have a better vision and I see that vision, I trust you to try to put it into action. Right. And so that was a moment where the kind of critic energy and the builder energy were in a single moment for me. And it was like a crossroads moment. And it's like, okay, so who am I going to be? Am I going to be perpetually telling other people what they're doing wrong? Or am I going to be somebody who's trying to build what's right?
Is this you being the person at the conference who's going up to the young activist and saying, I trust you, go build it? Or is there a different intention behind the book?
So, I mean, that is, Josh, that is exactly it. That right? Like this book is a sense of like, hey, go build it. Go build it. And there's a little bit of a challenge there, right? Like, and I felt a little bit of a challenge from Yolande in that moment. It is if you, first of all, you cannot only think to yourself, what is wrong with what's going on? You have to think to yourself, do I have an alternative that is better? Okay. So like if you take France in 1789, I don't know, right? Like you have the storming of the Bastille, then you have the Reign of Terror, which lasts for years, and then you have Napoleon. I don't know if what you get is better than what you removed, right? I'm pretty sure that people didn't pay that much attention to building what was better, but I think we ought to. I think there are many ways to make the world worse. I'm going to say that again. There are many ways to make the world worse. The question is your social change going to make it better? That's the question.
So let's delve into that. So I'm a young person. I am critiquing everything. In particular, I found the issue that I want to critique the most. How do I evaluate whether or not the changes that I'm seeking good for the world? How did you sort of temper your enthusiasm with pragmatism? How did you evaluate your early successes so that you knew Interfaith America was not just a new organization for its own sake, but it was making society better?
Josh, these are great questions. Thank you for these. So I think part of it is at the end of the day, I am like deep in my bones, I'm a Tocquevillian and I'm an Ismaili Muslim. And those, in this case, they overlap in a powerful way. Being a Tocquevillian means that I just recognize the power of institutions and the way institutions have shaped my life. The YMCA, public school and public university, how Catholic universities have shaped my parents' lives, right? Somebody built these institutions, okay? Somebody built them and I benefit from them. And if, the kind of whole Tocqueville to Putnam trajectory in American thought is a recognition of this is actually the genius of American democracy. And for the Aga Khan, the spiritual leader of my faith, and for Ismaili Muslims, the huge emphasis is on institution building, right? And my parents and my grandparents have been involved in building those institutions. It's the Ismaili Volunteer Corps and Jamaat Khanas, and my PhD was done on, in part on the Ismaili, the Institute of Ismaili Studies and the building of the institutions of Ismaili religious education. So I've been a beneficiary. I've been a scholar of it. I've been somebody who now is trying to build that, right? And I would say if I had to choose one hero in American history of like our range of the greats in American history, I would choose Jane Addams. Jane Addams would be the hero because I don't know if there was a more important figure in America in the late 19th, early 20th century, between call it 1890 and 1920. I don't know if you have a more important figure in America than Jane Addams, right? Maybe Teddy Roosevelt competes there, but America is going through this profound change from the farm to the city, industrialization. The American high school is not invented until 1916, something like that, or 1915, right? We don't have public high schools as a norm until 1915. And Jane Addams builds Hull House here in Chicago, 10 blocks from where I sit right now. And it is a laboratory of democracy. Every social problem that Jane Addams finds, sanitation problems and labor issues and child labor and all of these crazy educational challenges, she literally builds a solution at Hull House and then she scales the solution, right? So she is the uber institution builder, right? She's the archetypal American institution builder. And she creates a layer of democracy that we just take for granted. So that's, I'm kind of a student and a scholar of this, I guess, and now I walk in those footsteps in somebody who's trying to build an institution that really seeks to change the narrative of the nation from Judeo-Christian nation to Interfaith America, and that says religion is a bridge of cooperation, not a barrier of division. Diversity is not a melting pot, it's not a battlefield, it's a potluck. Bring your dish to the table and have it mix positively with other dishes and have a positive and interesting conversation with diverse people at the American potluck.
So I love that as the vision of Interfaith America. How are you building it?
Yeah. So I have a chapter in my book, or a section of my book, which is about nonprofit institution as the Grateful Dead and using the model of the Grateful Dead as the model of how you build a nonprofit organization. And there's a couple things about that I think is kind of an interesting analogy. One is the Grateful Dead they're all white guys on stage, so they look homogenous, right? But every single one of the band members comes from a different musical background, literally every single one. Right. So Phil Lesh is like a jazz guy. Jerry Garcia is a bluegrass guy. Mickey Hart is a world music drummer. Right. So you have these different musical traditions all kind of mixing on stage. Right. So it's a really interesting example of how you do a dimension of diversity. Every single one of them is a virtuoso. And I think that's really important. Like I honestly think in a lot of civic institutions, we settle for mediocrity. And that is not how we roll at Interfaith America. And you know this, Josh, you're on our board. Like our top 15, 20 people are national level figures, and any of them could lead their own civic institution, right? Like civic work is really hard. Social change is really positive. Social change is really hard. And you have to have excellent people giving their all to do it. And the dead were all virtuosos, right? And so that's super important. I think a third thing is they were virtuosos who wanted to play music together. There's a bunch of virtuosos who like want to be solo acts. You know, I don't want to be a solo act. It's so much more fun to like work with you, Josh, right? It's so much more fun to be a virtuoso with another virtuoso. You're learning from people, you're listening to people, you're growing, you're making beautiful music together, right? And then the final thing is the ability to just know your stuff cold, right? And so, you know, the U2 is an excellent band. I just saw them do Achtung Baby at the Sphere in Vegas, right? They're an excellent band. They basically play the same 25 songs every night. They might switch out 3 songs, right? And they are note for note perfect, okay? Springsteen, excellent, right? I see Springsteen every time I can. Basically, he plays the same 25 songs every night. He might switch 2 or 3 out. The Dead had a library of 200 songs, and they would play a different 20 every night, and they would play them in different ways. And so, again, like that's just a sense of like, we know our stuff. Like the waterfront is wide and we know all of it, right? And so I think the quality of folks who are building an institution, and who are working together in a particular way and who are just committed to a mastery of their material, I think that really matters. And I don't think anything substitutes for that.
Wow. So in many ways, what I've observed is a race for talent. And probably since the Reagan era, the private sector has gotten a lot of top talent at the expense of the nonprofit sector and government. How do we reverse that?
Yeah. Yeah. So look, I think you have to play, you have to pay decently. And in Interfaith America, like we're fortunate enough to be able to do that. Like people have to be able to raise their families in the way they want to raise their families, you know, or the way they need to. And I think we understand that. Like we've never been afraid of fundraising at the organization. And then I just think like people have to be here. They have to want to be in this band. Forgive the sirens. And what does that mean? They want to have to be able to play the music of pluralism, right? And there's lots of different kinds of diversity paradigms. If you want to do melting pot diversity, that is not who we are. If you want to do battleground diversity, that is not who we are. You have to want to play this music, and you have to want to do it like given the the context of a nonprofit organization that seeks to treat people with great dignity. So, are we in a hunt for talent? Yeah, but it's like basically there's a line about the Hells Angels, like they don't recruit, they recognize, right? And so we recognize people. We're like, okay, you belong in this band. Now maybe you can't join for this tour. Maybe you can't play on this album, but you're the kind of person who, has a mastery of the material. You're a virtuoso. You want to play with other people. This is the music you want to play.
Is your recipe for civil society also applicable to politics? Like, I just can't remember the last time I've heard someone ask anybody running for higher office, what do you plan to build from this office? Do you think that type of mindset, that type of question, that type of expectation could heal the rifts in a polarized society?
I mean, I think that's what Obama tried to do, right? A big part of the Obama narrative is look at how positively we cooperate in our little leagues. Can we do that on Capitol Hill, right? And I actually believe that. Like, again, I'm a Tocquevillian. Like, I believe that American civil society, library boards, and PTAs and little leagues, and I mean, this is the stuff of a society, right? Community theaters, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's the stuff of a society. And so I like the idea of let's participate constructively in our civil society and bring that ethos to our politics. I think that was a big part of the Obama line. By the way, like I kind of think that's been the mainstream rhetoric in American politics from Kennedy to Obama. And I think Romney was a part of that also, right? And I think it's in the last 10 years that honestly the line has been reversed, which is the destructiveness of American politics infects our civil society, right?
Wow. So someone reads your book. What do you want them to do? Do you want them to find an Interfaith America or another organization that inspires them? Do you want them to build their own? Do you want them to think differently? Do you want them to talk differently? Do you want them to give differently? What is the role of the reader from disparate backgrounds, disparate areas of interest, all of the rest?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say there's two things. Number one, I want people to realize the treasure that is America's religious diversity. To cherish the current treasure, the fact that so much of our civil society was built by people of diverse religious identities, Catholic universities, Jewish hospitals, the Inner City Muslim Action Network, right? I mean, you cannot walk into an art museum, and there's no art museum in America that doesn't have a wing that was sponsored by a Jewish family. Right. So that is a contribution by people inspired by one identity that benefits all of us. Okay. That is hugely important. That is the substructure of a diverse civil society, which is people expressing their identity in a way that serves all, as opposed to expressing their identity in a way that's a bludgeon of domination or a barrier of division. So one, recognize the treasure that is America's religious diversity and seek to level it up. How can our interfaith cooperation be even stronger? That's number one. Number two, be a builder, not a critic, right? Anything that you are criticizing, ask the question, what would I do to make it better in a concrete way? What would I do to make it better? What would I do to make it better?
So let me bring it back to the personal, if I may. And you've heard me use this line from Hebrew, or in Hebrew as well, livnot ulehibanot, to build and to be built. When you changed from being a critic to a builder, what changed within you?
Such a great question, Josh. Thank you for that. I think, I just became so much more grateful, right? I mean, like, turn on the water, turn on your tap, and there's water you can probably drink. Okay, I was born in a country where you can't do that. You cannot drink the water. My dad is in India right now. I love India, by the way. Nothing about this is casting aspersions. My dad's like, you can't breathe the air in Bombay. You can't breathe it. It is unbreathable. Okay. So if you turn on the tap and clean water comes out, somebody built the tap, somebody purified the water, somebody created the pipes to get the water to the tap. Somebody built that. Like literally, anything you do, look around and think to yourself, boy, somebody built this. Somebody invented this. Somebody invented indoor plumbing. Somebody invented refrigeration. And there was a time in human history where most people didn't have this. Alhamdulillah that I do. Masha'Allah, right? Really, like thanks be to God and thanks be to all the people who built it. Like I am the recipient of thousands of years of human ingenuity. Alhamdulillah, right? And then you ask the question, what's my contribution? What's my contribution? Like, will there be somebody in 40 years saying, alhamdulillah for this thing that this person built, and that person is you? And
they might not know that it's you. They might not know your name, but
it could be small. Like it could be letters to your great-great-granddaughter. You don't have to like figure out how to purify water to make a contribution to human civilization. Gary Snyder, the Buddhist poet, says, our job is to move the world a millionth of an inch. Like I believe in like small positive movement, right? And I also believe that a controlled burn can purify things. So I don't think protest is all bad. I'm not saying that. Okay. And I'm not saying that every institution we have is serving people, but I know this for sure. A social change ecosystem cannot have 100 arsonists for every architect. You can't have way more people eager to burn things down than people willing to build things, right? You have to have a lot more people who are like being like, hey, how do I build things? How do I build better schools? How do I build better healthcare clinics? How do I build better outreach programs? How do I build better mentoring programs? Each of those things is really important for a diverse democracy.
So before we begin our dialogue, Amre and I had the chance to talk just a little bit about, sort of at a human level, how you doing? How are you holding up? And this is called the Peace Islands Institute of New York. And we're in a world that does not seem to have a great deal of peace in it, or at least we're more keenly aware of the absence thereof. Is there a relationship between building and peace?
So I'm going to answer that's a powerful two-part question, Josh. Look, there are lots of terrible, calamitous things in the world right now, and to be very honest with you, I don't watch. I just don't watch. I can't. There are some people who can, and I just can't. And that I'm just being very honest. And it is some people have to. And for some people, it is part of their spiritual practice to be a witness. And I admire that. And there are some people who are deeply involved in a very personal way. And I know, Josh, you're one of those people. And my heart goes out to any one of those people. Any one of those people, my heart goes out to. I cannot watch. I can't watch. I have a friend who used to be the chaplain at Wake Forest, and he said something profound to me. He said, he didn't have a TV. And I asked him, like, why don't you have a TV, Tim? He said, because you turn on the TV and like 4 out of 5 times, there's something on there that it's kind of like it's hurtful to your spirit. And somewhere your body is processing that. And I thought that was like a really profound insight. Like your body is processing that, right? So look, I read like every day, I read the newsletters of like 8 different news sources. It's not like I'm shut off from the world. I'm New York Times, Washington Post, whatever. Like, trust me, like I am getting my news, or whatever, but I am not watching on television. I just can't. So, and part of it is my work is different. Okay. My work, and I think a part of our work, this might not be all of your work, it is 95% of my work. It is to say identity conflicts are going to happen, but they are not inevitable. They are not woven into the fabric of our beings. They are contextual. And my job is to expand the spaces where people from different identities cooperate. That is my job. And part of the reason that plays a role in peace, Josh, that's a building. That is a process of building. So Peace Islands Institute, that's what you do. This is a space where it is easier for people to cooperate. Right, Emory? That's part of what you're doing. Okay. So one is you want to expand those spaces as much as possible. You want to scale those spaces. You want to grow the number of people who know how to build those spaces. It's not an easy thing to build. But you also want to put in people's minds, oh yeah, the conflict in region X is based on the specific dynamics of region X. It is not universal. Right? The purple team and the green team don't always have to fight. The purple team and the green team fight when the context is a certain way. But in other contexts, they cooperate. So I am interested not just in expanding those other contexts, but I'm interested in getting that story into the public narrative. Hey, there's times when we conflict. There's times when we cooperate. Why don't we try to create more context where we can cooperate?
So I've got a couple of questions from folks who are watching. And Jeff asks, whether you see a connection between institution building and community organizing.
It's a good, so, I think it depends what kind of community organizing, right? I think that there's like, so I think that there's a fair amount of like fist in the air community organizing, right? And again, I think a fist in the air at some points is useful, but I think an outstretched hand is preferable. And so I would rather find ways to ask the question, how do we do this better together? Okay. How do we, the Mayo Clinic was built by an agnostic family, the Mayo family, and the Sisters of St. Francis in Rochester, Minnesota. These are people with deep differences who came together to build the best, maybe the best medical institution in the world. Right? That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about institution building. How do we create something that people look at and say, oh, that's better. That summer camp is better. That university is better. That healthcare institution is better. And obviously, I'm not saying this like for profit, right? Like I run a nonprofit. I don't really care about money. I'm not opposed to people building better companies, but I think civic institutions, I think community theaters and summer camps and elementary schools, I think that those are super important. And I think that we build them better together, right? So to the community organizing approach that is open hand, how do we do this better together? I really like that. And I think we need more of it right now.
So Ashraf has a question as well, or sort of is taking into account a premise from your comments. And Ashraf says, for this process of building of a pluralistic or more diverse America into it, for this to happen, people have to be educated and believe in diversity. And I think the implied question of that is, how can anybody take part in this? Like you're talking about an elite group of people who have higher education, who have bought into a system of diversity and inclusion work. What about everybody else? What about folks who don't go to college? What about folks who, all of that?
Look, I mean, I actually think that it's the most universal ethic possible. Anybody can be a builder, right? Like in American civil society, from Habitat for Humanity, if you volunteer, you're a builder. If you volunteer at the local food depository, you're a builder. If you bring somebody else into that situation, you're a builder, right? If you shovel your neighbor's driveway, you're a builder, right? So I mean, I actually think that I think so much building, important building, happens at the street level and at the block level. And the funny thing is, my wife will tell you, I'm not not only do I not organize the block party on my block, I barely even go. And she's like, Eboo's too busy writing about the importance of block parties to go to block parties, right? And she does not mean that as a compliment. My wife's the one who helps organize the block party. I actually think that's a lot more important, right? And so I think the beauty of the Tocquevillian approach to civil society is it is about participating in a constructive way, and any of us can do that.
So this is a universal call. And yes, people who read books might on average be more educated, but anybody can be a builder in one form or fashion.
That's right.
So Joe asks, what's the deal with paraphrasing. Let me actually quote Joe. Why shifted from IFYC to Interfaith America? Basically, why the change in the name of your organization?
Yeah, there's two reasons. Thank you for that. Number one, it's because the name of the organization, Interfaith Youth Corps, told a story, which was the story of religiously diverse young people positively engaging one another and being a benefit to society. I think that's really important. Interfaith America also tells a story, which is, this is who the nation is. We are past the Judeo-Christian chapter in the history of America, and we're into a different chapter, which is Interfaith America, right? That's who we are as a nation. And so the name tells a story. It's an aspirational story. And the second thing is, even as recently as 2015, 70% of our work at the organization was not directly with young people. It was with administrators on college campuses. It was with faculty. It was with staff. It was with people who served and worked with young people, but it was not directly with young people. And as our programs have expanded to work with civil society organizations like YMCA, Habitat for Humanity, Catholic Charities, to work with the White House, to work with private companies, we could know, those organizations don't all principally serve young people, right? And so it was just the name needed to catch up with the work of the organization.
Wonderful. So it seems like you've answered a lot of the questions that were presented. I want to ask a couple more, and then I want to leave Amre to ask some questions too. I, of course, in the middle of this, as any parent will know, got a call from my kid's school, so I'm a little worried about leaving that.
Yeah, Josh, you should, whatever you need to do for your own like spirit and mental state. I have gotten those calls. In fact, 50-50, I'll get one of those today.
We'll talk offline about that, maybe over some wonderful Turkish tea of the sort that Amre is enjoying right now. But Amre asked something that I think is keenly insightful. Are there lessons from other countries about building?
Oh, absolutely. I spent a week in Sri Lanka with the Sarvodaya Shramadana movement. The awakening of all through the service of others. I think that is a profound movement of building. It's impacted 10,000 villages in Sri Lanka. I spent a few months in South Africa at the turn of the millennium, actually, including at a place called Vilkesprite, which played a central role. It was called the Technicon of the struggle against apartheid, and just learning from the legacy of Mandela. He was alive at the time. I actually saw him speak, learning from his legacy about what it means to build a wider circle that everybody can participate in. Even after like just 27 years in jail, and he comes out and he says, my captors are now citizens of the nation, just like everybody else, right? That's the power dynamic there is based on generosity of spirit.
Wow. So let me ask you about, and this will be my final question, and then I'll let Amre remain in dialogue with you. He has a couple more from the chat now, it looks like. What do you do to feed your spirit so that you can give so generously?
Well, Josh, just the way you asked that question is super generous, right? So, look, I'm like human in the most human ways, so meaning my brain gets tired, like I get irritable like everybody else does. You know what I mean? And so what does that mean? That means I try to turn it off. Like I try to turn my brain off after 6 o'clock at night and like watch good Netflix or Hulu shows. I love art in the form of music and painting, and I spend as much time as I can in it. Like I love art that elevates, I take my foot off the gas pedal during the summers. And Josh, you and I have, if we have a phone meeting over the summer, 50-50, I'll be on a bike. You know what I mean? And so, Jane Addams wrote a book called 20 Years at Hull House. And 20 years later, she wrote another book called Another 20 Years at Hull House, right? And in order to stay for that long, you have to you have to know your patterns. And I'm like deeply connected to my religion and spirituality in my own way. Like I'm connected to being an Ismaili Muslim, like I carry my tasbih wherever I go. It's very important to me. I am connected to the example of the Prophet in Medina and his institution building that builds a pluralist city in Medina. So those examples are very important to me. And I try to be around people who lift me up. That's, I try not to spend time with people who don't lift me up. You two lift me up.
So I apologize, my dear friends. First of all, thank you for this already. And I do need to hop because I did get that call. But I just want to say that this has been one of the most impactful books I've read in the last decade. And I'm basically reading, as in every free moment I have, I read. And this is one of the books that has most changed my outlook. And so for those who are looking for a hopeful story about America and those who see themselves in that story, this is a really important book for you. And Emre, I can't wait to take you out for lunch or have you over for a meal with your family.
Well, let's make sure we get a promise from Eboo next time he's in New York. We host him, and even possibly even better is Josh and I are starting somewhat of a cooking challenge. We're going to be cooking for each other's families, so this is an opportunity for us to learn live. So maybe Eboo, if you're into cooking, we can have you and we can do a.
Into eating. I'm into eating. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we can do that as well. We've only got a couple of minutes, so I want to thank you. Just as a reminder to those that are watching and now or later, the link to Eboo's book is again in the chat and in the description. We do have a special event, and maybe you can chime in and give us your thoughts, particularly in the current climate. We've got an event in one of America's largest temples this week, a musical event. We've called it Peace Through Melodies, bringing together gospel, Jewish, and Sufi music. It'll be a live in-person event. So for those that are watching and don't know about it, please visit our social media for registration. But these are some of the things we're currently working on. Eboo, what's your take on bringing people together, even if it's through or as a result of music, through the arts?
I think that's beautiful. I think that's what people should be doing together, right? I love Rumi. I love Marc Chagall, and the reason I say that is because a huge part of their art was an art of bringing people together. You look at a Chagall painting and you're like, oh, look at all those different people together. And what are they doing? They're singing, they're dancing, they're reading. Like that's, so I think that is a civilization. That is what, John Courtney Murray said, a civilization is people living and talking together. How do we live and talk together? We do it through art, right? So I think like that's the zenith of human civilization.
Lovely. Thank you for that. And we're down to our last few moments. What's next on the horizon for both Eboo Patel and Interfaith America? We can end on this.
So I'm gonna end with one of my with two quotes that I think articulate our aspiration going into the future and do it in a poetic way. So one is by Edward Markham. He says, "You drew a circle that drew me out, heretic rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle that drew you in." Okay, so we want to be drawing circles that draw people in. And the other is by Ibn Arabi, the great Sufi poet. "My heart has grown capable of taking on every form. It is a cloister for monks. It is a temple for idols. It is a table for the Torah. It is Kaaba for the pilgrim. Whichever way love's caravan goes, that is the way of my heart." So that's who we want to be at Interfaith America. I know that that's what you want Peace Islands to be and who you are yourself, Emre. So thank you.
Thank you. Very, very gracious. That's the aim. There's the story of the ant trying to make the pilgrimage, and Solomon, who has the ability to speak to animals, asked the ant, "How can you get to the Kaaba?" You've just mentioned that with your small little body, your small little arms, and the ant replies, "Even if I don't make it, I'll die trying." So I think in intention, our intentions are very important. So they're the lofty ideals we aim to aspire to, and through institutions like Interfaith America, hopefully Peace Islands and others, we'll do our best to get to that destination. So thank you again, Eboo. I look forward to seeing you soon in New York. Thank you to everyone joining us on YouTube. Until next time, be well and safe. Have a pleasant rest of the day.
Everyone, bye-bye.